Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our show, Spin the Career Wheel with Nikkhiel Malhottra. Today, we have with us Professor Jeremy Simpson, Dean, Faculty of Science, University College Dublin, Ireland. Today, we are going to talk about careers beyond MBBS, especially for the students who are studying biology at a class 11th and 12th level. Welcome, Professor Simpson.
Thank you very much, Nikkhiel. It's great to be on the podcast today.
And thank you so much for taking time out to be on our show.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure for me.
And I just heard that this is like your 40th visit to India. You're more Indian than us.
No, I've been traveling to India for UCD now for more than 12 years. I think there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, I think there's very good connections between Ireland and India. But actually what I've seen over the years is the passion that Indian students have for some of the subjects we offer. So it's always a pleasure to come here and meet talented students.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you so much. Now, before we begin our discussion, I would like to share from the situation from an Indian student and their parents' perspective. So in India, we have this exam called as NEET, and there are around 24 lakh students who appear for this exam to become doctors. Now, we have only 1,20,000 seats. So technically, which means around 22 lakh Indian students will not be able to become doctors, even though they want to become doctors. They have aspired to be a doctor for the last 2 years, 3 years. What is your view on a situation like this when students are stuck after the exam results are out?
Yes, and I think I'm aware of this situation. And maybe the first thing I would say, maybe particularly to the students and their parents, is not to panic. So, we're talking about students who are at the very beginning of their career. And just because they maybe don't clear one exam, it doesn't mean that all other options are not open to them. And I think one of the things I'd really like to explore in the session today is actually the multitude of different careers that are possible beyond medicine. And I think it's really important to say that actually, although careers in medicine are fantastic and offer many opportunities, actually medicine is underpinned by so many other discipline areas in the sciences, and those other discipline areas, they offer amazing opportunities. So the students shouldn't worry and panic. Plenty of other opportunities available.
That's like a very good news, I think, for all the parents especially. And I think it is more to do with the Indian mindset. And when kids are growing up, they really want to become a doctor. And it's been from centuries now. And I think with the coming of AI, things are changing the way medicine industry is progressing. So some of the careers which I hear is one of them is computational biology. What exactly is that?
No, you're absolutely right. I think the landscape of careers and opportunities has really changed remarkably over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Computational biology, really interesting area. This is an area that really emerged initially about 20 years ago, following some landmark science, particularly sequencing of genomes. So really that's the gathering of our understanding of the code of life.
Okay.
And I think scientists then realized that actually understanding that code of how we're built as human beings could unlock so many secrets about medicine and about health and disease. And so computational biology as a discipline brings in expertise from computer science, so algorithms, problem solving in that area, with knowledge of biology and biological systems, and tries to make use of that wealth of information to actually enhance how we, for example, understand certain human diseases. And I think it's a great example because it is one of those kind of career areas that sits at a discipline interface. You could come from a biology, life sciences background, but you could come from an IT, a computer sciences background. And actually, computational biology is showing enormous potentials, as I say, to unlock many mysteries with respect to human diseases.
And that again, that brings me back to that question we are talking about students who have studied biology. So when they are in their class 10th, students who are very clear they want to study MBBS, they'll just take physics, chemistry, and biology and some other subjects. Very few will actually take biology with a maths combination. And the moment I'm talking about this career with you, I can understand that maybe maths is an important important component if somebody is looking at careers, some of the other futuristic careers.
No, and that's really an important point as well. And again, I think looking back, in the past, often students who were looking to do biology type subjects would have said that, oh, mathematics is just not important. But actually, when I look now at modern current biology and the disciplines around it, again, mathematics turns out to be very important. It's not that you have to be an ace or a whiz at mathematics, but you have to have a fundamental understanding. And that simply just reflects the amount of data that we now have to deal with in biology and the life sciences.
I agree. And I think when I look at that, again talking about what happened during COVID, and nobody had any data around what is going to happen. And now we have this situation. So have you seen any changes specifically after COVID in the medicine industry, the way they are moving now?
Yeah, so again, I think COVID is a really, it's a terrible example, but it's also a good example because actually, COVID as a pandemic actually probably opened up the eyes of the world to the importance of science and research. That's the first important thing I would say. The scientific community had to respond quickly. We had to understand the disease, and probably more importantly, we had to be very quick at developing vaccines.
Correct.
A process that traditionally has been very slow. So one of the things that I see now post-COVID is in a way that science, the medical sciences, is able to be more agile and more dynamic, so respond much quicker to a threat such as a pandemic.
Right.
What it also, of course, really enabled is much better, I'm going to say, transnational research. So again, maybe traditionally some aspects of science and research would be very localized. But of course, as we all know, everything suddenly had to move online during COVID, and equally science and research had to be mobilized in a similar way. So one of the things I certainly see now, particularly in the large pharma sector, is that actually you can have research teams sitting in Europe, sitting in Japan, sitting in the United States, but all collaborating really effectively on healthcare problems and developing solutions.
So what I understand, maybe I'm just trying to reiterate what you said, that a company in US might have a team of Indian researchers doing research in Delhi, but still working for the US organization. Something like that?
Exactly. Now, you see, I think what's curious is that science has always been, if you like, an international business. So, normally in the training of young scientists, the normal pattern is that you would maybe start in one country, but you'd, for example, you might do a PhD, your doctorate in another country, maybe a postdoc somewhere else to build that knowledge and build that collaboration network. That still holds true today, but I think the availability of online tools just makes it so much easier to collaborate around the world effectively.
So traditionally, I did my engineering. I remember when I was a science student, but never entered into the regular sciences because we are never able to visualize that as a career. And for us, the career is not just studying and getting a job. The career is also the kind of respect which we'll get in that job. Also, the pay packages in that particular career. So how, and I know your background, you have done research in a lot of world-class institutes. Can you explain more about what can be the careers in research if somebody is not becoming a doctor? What can they do in research?
No, and this is, again, it's a really important point. So I think maybe the first comment I'd make is that actually all of medicine, as we know it and understand it, is underpinned by science and research. So again, if we touch back on COVID as an example and the speed by which vaccines were developed, that development of vaccines was done by scientists in labs. So actually, when we're thinking about careers like this, careers in the biopharmaceutical sector actually give amazing possibilities. So that, for example, would include things like the initial concept design behind a drug to treat a particular disease. There would be careers in the formulation of that drug. What would it actually look like, for example, to make it compatible with humans? Then there would be things like development of the product. There would be upscaling of it to be able to manufacture at large scale. And then there would be things like quality control. So I guess I'm saying there's a whole series of jobs just within the biopharma sector for drug development and design. But of course, it goes much beyond that.
Yeah.
So, for example, we could then look to biomedical devices. Let's give an example. Something like a stent in the heart.
Correct.
So a biomedical device that requires precision engineering, but
Yes.
again, there is the science behind that.
Correct.
What is the correct shape for that material? What is the type of material that would work best in an artery, in a vein, etc.?
Correct.
And actually, all of that type of development has to be underpinned by science and by research.
Correct.
So that's biopharma careers, that's biomedical device careers. But actually, we could go way beyond that. When I even just perhaps think about a few of the students that I've been mentoring over the years, one of my graduate students, for example, now works for the Forensic Service of Ireland.
Okay.
Now, that wasn't her original training.
Correct.
But of course, what she has developed during her training is an in-depth analysis of biological samples. It was for her research at the time. But of course, that knowledge is fundamentally important. I'm sure some of your listeners have watched programs like CSI, that type of thing.
Correct.
And so, you have a biological sample from a crime scene.
Yeah.
Well, you need a scientist to investigate that biological sample. What is the genetic traces within that? And again, those are careers in the sciences that are available to actually, for example, help solve some mysteries like that.
I agree. I think, thank you so much. And these days there are, I hear terms like genetic counseling or stem cell therapies, or not therapies, stem cells. So what is genetic counseling? Who should do that? A psychology student should do that, or a biology student should do that?
Another great example.
Yeah.
So genetic counseling is basically where we're interested in human disease. And obviously, in many instances, human diseases arise as a consequence of changes in our genes, that code that we talked about earlier, that is the makeup of what we are. So it's about exploiting that information. Your genetic code is a little bit different from my genetic code.
Yes.
And the job of a genetic counselor is to take that information from a patient and, as a scientist, for example, to understand what information is in the genes that would actually help make a prediction about the likelihood of certain diseases in the future. So an example would be, for example, diabetes. We could make a prediction based on your genetics or my genetics as to how likely you are to develop a disease such as diabetes.
So we are talking about personal medication here.
Exactly, it becomes very much personalized medicine. And of course, that genetic counselor is, again, at that interface. They have the human side, they have to deal with the individuals, but to be able to do that job, they need the scientific background. The science training underpins that career as well.
So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking more from a class 10th or class 9 student's perspective, that I wanted to become a doctor. I wanted to really work on human health. So while we are talking about human health, you can become a doctor or a dentist or a physiotherapist. But at the same time, after talking to you, when we are doing research or we are talking about research careers, they are actually helping them serve the doctors. So, and from a student's point of view again, are there enough job opportunities in the research sector that a student can really look at that as a career right when they are in their class 10th?
No, absolutely. And again, I suppose it's coming back to that point about the different roles that we have in healthcare. So in a way, we can often think about the doctor, the MBBS graduate, as being at the front line. They're dealing with the patient day to day, maybe helping diagnose the disease. And ultimately, their job is to say, this is the appropriate therapy. But of course, what we're talking about is that therapy itself. Who designed it originally? Who came up with the concept for it?
Okay.
What should that therapy actually look like? How do we manufacture it in an appropriate way? In a way that's affordable, for example, if we're looking at a disease that maybe affects several thousand or potentially several million people. And it's those careers there within the science and research that actually fundamentally underpin everything else in the health sciences. And I think it's probably also important to say, while we've made huge progress in combating certain diseases, cancer as an example, the battle is not won.
Right.
We can treat many cancers very effectively, but there are others that are still more challenging. Now, of course, the consequence of that is that the average life expectancy around the planet is increasing all of the time.
Good.
So we all look at each other and say, fantastic, haven't we done a great job? We all live much longer than we used to do. But of course, now we've created a new problem because with advancing age, other diseases are starting to emerge more and more. So we might think of examples such as Alzheimer's disease. So, neurological diseases that typically will manifest later in life.
Right.
So now, of course, we've almost started to solve one problem in the health sciences, but now another problem is becoming more important. So again, we'll be turning to science and to research to actually find solutions to problems to address things like diseases associated with the brain.
Yes, and there will be more and more research openings, and which is very positive for all these students. Now, again, so these are like around human health and then research. Again, there are some careers like agriculture or environment sciences. Now, when I look at environment sciences, what do students really do here? What do they do in these careers?
And again, I'd say that's an area that is being seen of increasing importance. So again, if we maybe just step back and we first look at healthcare. So we've said, yes, healthcare is important and we want new drugs, new therapeutics to combat them. Well, actually, when we think about that, it turns out that actually many of the drugs and the therapeutics that we use today have an origin somewhere in nature. So they, for example, are drugs that may be based on something that exists naturally in a plant.
Correct.
So actually the job of environmental scientists, or I should say one of the jobs of environmental scientists, is to actually think about our wider ecosystems, our habitats, the protection of, for example, animal, but maybe in particular plant life. Because actually, to be honest, as scientists, we still don't know the depth and the wealth of that resource that is on the planet still. So this is, I'd say, where careers in the environmental sciences are also increasingly important. We have to protect all of the resources we have because, again, we can see examples where that knowledge can, again, underpin healthcare.
Correct. And so I'll give you another situation. Now, again, coming back to the biology and comparing these two competitive exams in India. So one is NEET, which is students who want to become doctors. One is IIT JEE, wherein students who want to become computer science engineers or engineers. Now, the difference is, even though both the exams are very competitive, the difference is a student who will not clear a JEE exam will still be able to become a computer science engineer from any other university. But a student who does not clear a NEET will not be able to become a doctor. And hence, there's a lot of more pressure on a student. And there is a need that instead of telling a student that, okay, you have these backup options, there is a need that students should know that these are good career opportunities in biology right at class 9th and 10th. And what do you think? What will be your advice to such students and parents when they start thinking of becoming a doctor in class 9th and 10th?
Yeah, and so I think one of the aspects that's really changed in terms of how large international universities deliver programs around the sciences is actually what those degrees now look like. So what do I mean by that? Well, maybe in the past, students, when they were looking at degree options, might have looked at classical things such as zoology or botany.
Yes.
But of course, now you look at a large international university, you will see degree subjects in, for example, genetics. We've spoken a little bit about genetic counseling in this session. You will see, for example, neuroscience. You will see molecular biology. You will see pharmacology, the science of drugs. So these type of subjects are really starting to take that basic biology, life science knowledge, but actually present it in a much more applied manner to students. So again, it's giving students that insight into that other disciplines are there beyond the classic disciplines, and that those new subject areas can potentially lead into exciting careers underpinning the health sciences more broadly.
Yeah.
But there's one other key point to make, and that is that actually degree disciplines should never also be seen as just silos or packages in their own right. Again, one of the things that I think we pride ourselves really well in UCD is really the holistic way that our degrees actually work. So although we offer those type of specializations, actually our students do really well because within our degrees we embed other subjects. So, for example, all of our students learn some extra mathematics. All of our students learn some basic programming. All of our students in the sciences, in the biological sciences, learn a little bit about data science and how to handle data.
That's interesting.
So these degrees have changed. I say traditionally, 10, 15, 20 years ago, a student would have come in and just learned within their degree discipline. But now what we see in our degrees is the depth is greater, but more importantly, the breadth is wider. And I think that makes for ultimately a more rounded student, a more rounded graduate at the end of the degree.
So you have some example of some Indian student who might have studied a science degree at your university, and what are they doing now? Any you have some example like that?
Well, I've probably got so many examples, and I suppose we're really blessed that Ireland and UCD in particular has been such a target destination of Indian students in recent years. So again, thinking about some of the students I've mentored, myself, I can think of one young lady who now actually works in what's called our National Bioprocess and Technology Laboratories.
Okay.
And actually her role is in that area of how do we take a pharmaceutical that we've designed and developed, and how do you now make not just a few milligrams of it, but actually how do you make kilos of that product, such that actually we can now treat not just a handful of patients, but actually we can treat thousands or tens of thousands of patients. And her role in this particular laboratory is actually to design the pipelines, if you like, for actually scaling up of a drug from laboratory scale to industrial scale. And I think, watching her as an example and how she's progressed from doing a degree with us to actually now how she's making a real difference in drug design is of course incredibly satisfying to see something like that.
Yes, and I think such are the examples which a lot of students will want to hear more about, so that they are more confident. And again, my last question on this is, from a student who really wants to study something into the normal science programs, do you think a global perspective, an international university, can add a better career opportunities?
I think what an international university does is it gives breadth and collaboration. And I guess what I mean by that is that a large international university has a network. So again, when I think about the pathway that some of our own students take, a significant number of our students would, for example, do a semester abroad. So they're doing their program, of course, in Dublin, but actually we offer all of our students in science the opportunity to spend either one semester or an entire academic year in one of our partner universities. And that could be in the US or Canada, it could be in Singapore, it could be Australia, New Zealand. So that international exposure, I think, also broadens the reach and the understanding of the student. Now, of course, what we also want to do is we want our students to understand those breadth of career opportunities. So again, another thing we're particularly proud of is the internship program that we run. And again, we're lucky in Ireland being home to so many large multinational companies. It's very easy for us to place students typically at the end of the third year of their degree in one of the multinational biopharma companies for the summer. So that's a great opportunity because they've got a good amount of knowledge, academic knowledge from their degree. And now they're going into a large multinational and actually starting to understand how that knowledge translates into the real world of what the biopharma company needs to do. And so I suppose it's opportunities such as a semester abroad and internship opportunities that actually make an international university actually such an attractive option for students.
So I understand you mentioned that students can do internships while they are studying their degrees. What happens once they finish their degrees? Are they allowed to work in Ireland once they finish their degrees, or?
No, that's right. And I think one of the great things about Ireland as a destination is it's an incredibly international, multicultural environment. And actually the Irish economy over several years has been actually built around the technology sector. So again, we are very lucky to have 9 out of the top 10 world global pharmaceutical companies in Ireland.
Okay, that's
so
very
actually
interesting.
many of our graduates, on completing their degree will work with our career development center in the university to secure those jobs in one of the multinationals. And of course, that's important for us as a country because we are training talent that is going to work in those companies in the future. And again, Ireland has long had a very progressive visa policy for international students. So, for example, students completing a bachelor's degree with us automatically get a 1-year stay-back visa. And graduates completing a graduate program, a master's or a PhD, get an automatic 2-year stay-back visa. So amazing opportunities to taste some of the things we've been talking about, biomedical device industry, biopharma sector, and actually seeing if that's really right for them. And of course, hopefully, ultimately, taking the next step on their career journey.
Yeah, so this brings me to another question. You mentioned about the postgrad students. So students who are studying bachelor's here in India, bachelor's in science, maybe a zoology or a regular ones, do you think they still have an opportunity to study master's at some of the leading universities and be into the futuristic careers in biology?
No, for sure. I think that's also, a very, very viable pathway for many students. You see, a master's degree is really building that in-depth additional knowledge on top of the bachelor's. A master's degree is about adding a specialization. So what do I mean by that? Well, again, if I take one of our own programs as an example, we offer a 1-year MSc in the area of biotherapeutics. Biotherapeutics. So you can imagine a student could come from a more basic biology background, but actually their interest is, well, how do we develop a therapeutic product? I know the basic biology, but how do we design a drug?
Correct.
And that's exactly what that type of master's program is about. It's about taking a student from a more fundamental biology, life sciences background, but equipping them with key knowledge that will help them bridge that step into the biopharma sector.
I think that's a very important piece of information. And I think a lot of students who ended up being into BScs in India can really look up to study a master's at, say, UCD. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor, for taking time out for this discussion. And I'm sure a lot of you there, the students and their parents would have got a different perspective about careers after biology. Thank you so much.